Hello everybody, my name is Reverend Jennifer and I'm going to tell you a story this morning about how Jesus first met his special friends. If you remember, Jesus lived and worked around the Sea of Galilee, and he met some fishermen who became his friends, and his friends, if you remember, were called disciples, and they went with him to learn all they could about God's kingdom and who Jesus was and what he had come to tell everybody. So let's hear the story about how Jesus first met Peter and Andrew and James and John. As I've said, Jesus grew up in a place called Galilee, and there was a large and beautiful lake. And he began his work that God gave him there. And he said God is like a king, and he wants all of you to be part of his kingdom, to love him and to love each other. Everybody liked to hear Jesus talk, and in fact one morning the crowd was so huge that Jesus was nearly pushed into the sea. "Excuse me," Jesus asked the fisherman, "could I borrow your boat for a while?" The fisherman's name was Peter. "Of course," he said, "it's doing me no good. I was out all night and didn't catch a thing." So Jesus climbed into the boat. Peter rowed it out a little way from shore, and from there Jesus spoke to the crowd. When he had finished, Jesus sent everybody home, and then he turned to Peter and said, "Let's go out a little further. I'd like to catch some fish." Peter thought this was really funny and laughed. "I told you my men and I were out all night and we caught nothing." Jesus didn't say a word. He just smiled and looked across the lake. "All right," said Peter, "if that's what you want." So Peter sailed out to the deepest part of the lake, and then he dropped his fishing nets over the side. It took no time at all. The nets started pulling and jerking and stretching, and it was all Peter could do to keep the boat from tipping over. "Help!" Peter cried to his friends nearby. "Help me, please!" And they rowed to him as fast as they could. Then, all together, the men pulled on the nets, and the fish came tumbling and slapping onto the decks of both boats. Redfish and bluefish, and not just one or two fish. So many, in fact, that the boats would have sunk had the fishermen not rowed quickly back to shore. Peter looked at the fish. Peter looked at his friends. Then Peter looked at Jesus and fell on his knees, trembling. "Only God or somebody full of his power could do that," Peter said. "And why would someone like that want to go fishing with the likes of me?" Jesus shook his head and smiled. "Don't be scared," he said. "God has given me a lot of work to do, and I need helpers. Helpers like you and your friends. Once you fished for fish, but from now on you'll be fishing for people and helping me to bring them to God." Then Jesus stepped out of the boat and walked away across the shore. "Come with me," he called. Peter and his friends watched him go. They looked at the fish, they looked at each other, then they dropped their nets, left their boats behind, and raced off to follow Jesus. And we know that the disciples stayed with Jesus all the while he was teaching and preaching and telling them stories. And the picture I've got behind me shows Jesus and the two boats. You can just about see them. And here is Peter and his brother Andrew, who was also there. And the two friends in the story are James and John, and their dad was called Zebedee, and they left poor old Zebedee in the boat and off they went. But I think they had other men that worked for them and helped with the fishing once the four friends had gone to follow Jesus and to learn all about that Jesus could teach them. And one of the things that Jesus taught them was a prayer, because they asked if he would teach them a prayer. And it's a prayer that we know today, and we say in assembly, we say it in church, and followers of Jesus say it all around the world in many, many different languages. But we're going to say it in English today, unless, of course, you know it in another language, and then I think you could say it in your own language. So we say together, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. So until next time I see you, or you may see one of my friends who's going to tell you a different story from the Bible. So until next time, goodbye.